something doesn't add up, and that's exactly why this matters. Over the last few days, a very specific claim has been circulating aggressively across dinar-focused corners of the internet, that the IMF has approved a revaluation of the Iraqi dinar and that a countdown has officially begun. On the surface, it sounds definitive, it sounds final, and for people who have been following Iraq's currency story for years, it feels like the moment they've been waiting for. But here on Dinar Stories, our job isn't to amplify excitement. It's to slow the narrative down, examine what's actually being said, and separate institutional reality from momentum-driven storytelling. Because when you're dealing with currencies, especially one as politically and structurally complex as the Iraqi dinar, that distinction matters more than almost anything else. Here's the part most people miss right away. The International Monetary Fund does not approve currency revaluations in the way social media implies. There is no ceremonial green light. No press release announcing that a currency will suddenly be worth more next week. What the IMF does is far more technical, far more influential, and far less dramatic. So when you hear language like IMF approval tied to a sudden increase in value, the real question isn't when does the revaluation happen. The real question is what exactly did the IMF engage with and what does that engagement actually signal? Now zoom out for a moment. Iraq has been working with the IMF for years. That's not new. These engagements take the form of Article 4 consultations, staff-level agreements, technical assistance programs, and monitoring frameworks. Their purpose is to stabilize government finances, modernize banking infrastructure, and improve currency management. None of these mechanisms mandate a higher exchange rate. But all of them influence whether a country is even capable of sustaining one. And that distinction is critical. Currencies don't rise because someone allows them to. They rise when underlying conditions can support that move without triggering inflation, capital flight, or financial instability. This is where the conversation usually gets uncomfortable and where Dinar Today earns its credibility. Because what's actually happening in Iraq right now isn't a countdown, it's a restructuring. The Central Bank of Iraq has been under pressure to stabilize the dinar following volatility tied to dollar access, capital controls, and international compliance requirements. Over the past year, Iraq has restructured how dollars are auctioned, tightened banking oversight, and brought its financial messaging systems closer to global standards. These are not cosmetic changes. They are structural. And they're happening because Iraq needs access to global trade settlement, access to correspondent banking, access to foreign capital, and ultimately access to credibility. The IMF's involvement is about that process: supervision, alignment, risk reduction. A country that cannot control capital flows cannot safely strengthen its currency. A country that cannot track transactions cannot open its banking system to the world. And a country that relies heavily on oil revenue must be extremely careful about how exchange rate changes affect its budget. So yes, things are moving, but not in the way many narratives frame it. What's moving is infrastructure. What's moving is compliance. What's moving is capacity. And that's a very different story from an imminent windfall. This is where the emotional core of the story matters. Many people have been holding Iraqi dinar for years, sometimes decades. Over that time, they've heard predictions come and go, dates appear and vanish, and confident declarations dissolve quietly. That history creates hope and fatigue at the same time, and when a message shows up claiming final IMF confirmation, it hits both at once. But here's another layer. If the IMF had formally endorsed a specific revaluation outcome, it would be visible in public documentation, consultation summaries, official statements. Exchange rate policy discussions are not hinted at through third-party commentary. They're discussed openly. Markets don't move on rumors at this scale. They move on policy clarity. That doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means what's happening is slower, more technical, and far less headline-friendly than most people want it to be. Let's talk about the word revaluation, because this is where confusion compounds. In market terms, a revaluation is an administrative change to a fixed or managed exchange rate. Iraq operates a managed system. Adjustments can happen, but they're typically modest, carefully timed, and designed to support fiscal balance, not speculation. A sharp upward move would have enormous consequences. Government revenue would shrink in dinar terms, import dynamics would shift, and domestic pricing would be affected. That's why Iraq has historically favored stability over appreciation. If you're asking whether Iraq could eventually support a stronger dinar as its economy stabilizes, that's a legitimate macro question. But if you're asking whether an external institution approved a sudden leap in value, that's not how the system works. So here's what actually matters. Watch how Iraq manages dollar access over the next several quarters. Watch whether the gap between official and parallel rates narrows sustainably. Watch whether foreign banks deepen relationships instead of pulling back. Watch whether fiscal discipline holds when oil prices fluctuate. Those are the signals that determine currency credibility. If those trends continue, Iraq gains optionality. And optionality, not promises, is what eventually changes currency regimes. One last misconception needs to be cleared up. IMF involvement does not equal inevitability. Engagement is not endorsement. Oversight is not approval. Technical progress does not guarantee market repricing, but lack of engagement almost guarantees stagnation. So this moment matters, just not in the way it's being sold. Iraq is inside a reform corridor, not at the finish line. The dinar is becoming less fragile, not suddenly powerful. And that shift, while boring, is far more meaningful than a viral countdown. That's why Dinar Stories exists. Not to tell you what you want to hear, but to help you understand what the system is actually signaling. Because in macro stories like this, the real risk isn't missing a revaluation. It's misunderstanding the process so badly that you miss the signals that actually matter.